Sean is all about the statistical evidence.
Well, today, okay, I should just say today is, we're talking Canada's Broken Mosaic, the Literary Critics of Multiculturalism, Part 2.
Absolutely.
Today, right?
I bought this book, Trudocracy, by Ludor J. Zink. He was a columnist for Ottawa.
Yeah.
And he was actually an Ottawa columnist, and he published this in 1972, and I found this in Peterborough when I went to little bookstores.
Boy, that must have been a real find, eh?
It was,
because,
absolutely.
I mean, I've heard of Ludor Zink, but to think a book like that came out in 72, that was very early in Trudeau's time as Prime Minister.
This one also is a hatchet job on the sun god, and I'd like to read a quote that Trudeau said in the spring of 1970. In an interview, he said, "One has to be in the wheelhouse to see what shifts are taking place. I know that we have spun the wheel, and I know that the rudder is beginning to press against the waves in the sea. But perhaps the observer who is on the deck and smoking his pipe or drinking his tea sees the horizon much in the same direction and doesn't realize it. But perhaps he will find himself disembarking at a different island than the one he thought he was sailing for."
Who said that? Trudeau?
Yeah, this is from Chapter 2, Danger Signals.
That's just like Harper. It's the same way, except steering it back to where it was.
Absolutely. I don't know if you guys have heard of this book, Where Race Does Not Matter by Cecil Foster, The New Spirit of Modernity.
I have not heard of that book.
Well, he was a leading Canadian intellectual, and in Chapter 4, Harvesting the Hope of History, it says here, and this is like when multiculturalism was accepted immediately without any debate about it.
So when was this book?
It was published 2005.
Oh, so it's
okay.
recent. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote here in this Chapter 4, as a particular home, Canada, this place and time to which we have come is steeped in contradictions. I think it always has been, actually, Canada. We want a strong country that also privileges diversity. We want individual members to benefit fully from their virtues and talents, which is an amiable goal. But we also want equality among all citizens. We want to be a people noted in the world for all humanity and all good life, but at the same time we want to help all humanity to achieve the standard that we enjoy. Now that's very difficult to achieve in countries like India or Southeast Asia, where it costs tens of billions to bring people up to the same standard of living that we enjoy, and it took us quite a while to get there ourselves. Like, we struggled through different phases and stuff, you know? I don't know if that's realistic. And within our boundaries, we want every individual and every group to be proud of his or her past, but committed to a joint future that may even necessitate the repudiation of things in the past. In other words, ethnically cleanse your past and create a new future based on social engineering. That's the way I interpret that statement.
Oh, I interpret it as being that if we're going to create a common future together, that we kind of forget about some of our
Past.
I disagree completely. I say we study the past and learn from it and become more progressive citizens with a shared sense of cultural identity and cultural capital, so that at least if we know the past, we know where we did right and where we went wrong, so that if we move into the future, we'll at least do it together based on the mistakes and successes of the past. So,
see, I disagree with that theory. To me, just the title, Where Race Does Not Matter, that's the title of the book. That, to me, tells me, if I interpret that, I would say, okay, so where race does not matter means everybody's created equal. So let's forget about any past and let's just start at our humanism, what we all want.
that might be true, but I personally don't believe, based on my research, that all cultures are equal. And culture defines the way we live our lives and the way we treat other citizens.
But we get to choose from this point moving forward how we want our culture to be. So I mean, especially if people are coming to a young country like Canada, which is relatively new. Okay, we're still a baby.
1867, Sandra. We've had 200 years to develop a Canadian identity. If we haven't, shame on us.
And that's why you're right. We have made a lot of mistakes from the past, but I don't want to review the past. I want to say, okay, you know what? Let's just everybody is created equal. Let's start from here.
But if you don't,
that means everybody starts from the same place.
If you don't learn from the past,
culture,
Andrew, you'll repeat the mistakes of the past in the future in different ways.
Not if everybody has their voice. Not if everybody gets to speak. But you have to leave the emotional baggage behind, and that means all those cultural barriers have to be left behind.
Well, the emotional baggage for sure, but I think we could still study it, as Sean's saying.
Yeah, there's serious issues. Like on other debates that have come on this show, the life in some of these countries is not worth replicating. It's not worth us encouraging people to behave as if they've never left their home country, because all it does is end up in honor killings and murder and terrorism. And gender discrimination.
Right, but we don't have to study that to know that. We just say, it's not here.
Well, we better know why people are doing it, Sandra, so that we understand what went wrong, so we can probably try to at least fix it, or at least address the issues, or prevent it from happening. You know? So, I want to read the rest of this. I'm glad you guys took time out to debate these issues. These are pretty cool things. We want to be a people noted in the world for our humanity and good life. But at the same time, we want to help all humanity to achieve the standard of living that we enjoy. I already said that, actually. And within our boundaries, we want every individual, every group to be proud of his or her past, but committed to a joint future that may even necessitate the repudiation of things in the past. We want to have the choice of self-identity as Canadians or as members of some ethnic group, but we demand universal acceptance and recognition of equality for everyone. Canada appears to be settling on the model that is multiculturalism, an official policy that is synonymous for contradictions and paradoxes. Canada has decided to live out its contradictions daily in the hope that problems of race and ethnicity will be solved tomorrow. In other words, just keep pushing it into the future and hopefully everything will work out. And this is what Prime Minister Trudeau said, quote, "Every single person in Canada is now a member of a minority group," end quote. That's what he said. It's not true, though.
What does he mean by that? Every single person in Canada is now a member of a minority
It's
group.
social engineering, Sandra. When you say that we're all citizens of the world, that we're all a multicultural society, you basically can brainwash citizens into believing there's no such thing as a Canadian cultural identity, and you could change the conversation and the mindset by changing the psychological disposition of the statement. But there's only, if you look at the statistics from StatsCan 2011, there's 7.2 million foreign-born citizens, and there's 35 million people living in the country. So 20% of the population is foreign-born. So it's not true that we're all, foreign-born or whatever. 80% of the country was born in this country, and if we don't recognize that those people born here are Canadian citizens, then that's a sign of betrayal and reverse discrimination and the robbing of a cultural heritage of those 80%.
Okay, so let's just dig down a little deeper, though. Do you have the stats on 80% are Canadian-born? You're saying?
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Okay, so in a place like Toronto. Okay,
46.
That doesn't feel like...
It's about 46%. The major cities are different.
Okay, so what are the stats? So how many are Canadian-born in the city like Toronto?
Vancouver was 40% foreign-born. Toronto was 46. It's probably about 50 by now, because these are old statistics, a couple years ago.
Okay.
So, but there's less people now coming to the major cities because there's mass unemployment, because we instituted mass immigration, and our low productivity was unable to absorb all the people who poured into the cities. And now there's ethnic ghettos of citizens living in pockets that they might as well not have left their home country.
Exactly. Because the New World Order, who's behind this high immigration agenda, doesn't care.
It's a consumption strategy. All it does is create wealth for real estate agents, for the banks, for the food companies, for the phone firms. It depresses labor markets.
Which is all the New World Order, right, Hugh?
That's right, Sandra. That's right. Now you're catching on. They just want to impose a global government.
Student.
And the only way to do that is by screwing up all the countries and the nation states.
Salim Mansour, you don't see mass immigration of people from India into China or white people into Africa and telling people to respect diversity. There'd be riots. They would kill and murder. You wouldn't believe the amount of violence.
But you know what? What I'm hearing, though, Sean, is now places like Sweden and the UK are tons and tons of foreigners there now.
In fact, London just became a non-white city. It's 55% Indian and Pakistani. Londoners have become minorities in their own city. Absolutely. It was an article from one of the...
when did that happen? When did that change over?
This year, from the Census Bureau.
That's amazing.
So.
See, now that's got to change everything.
It does.
Do they have no identity then? Can we say that
they do? But I'm going to actually get to that in a couple minutes. That's a good question, and it was brought up in this book. I'm just going to read something from Professor Salim Mansour's Chapter 7, The Paradox of Multiculturalism. He released this book in 2011.
Okay.
It says, multiculturalism was clearly a policy, an offer in the early 70s in Canada aimed at the requirements of a political party, the Liberal Party, and similarly it would be an offer by center-left parties and other liberal democracies of the West to capture, for the long term in politics, marginal votes in electoral districts of the newly arriving immigrants. It is a difference in marginal votes in closely contested electoral districts that accounts for winning or losing in elections, and by securing the ethnic immigrant votes in the urban centers where immigrants settled on arrival, the Liberal Party, as would Democratic Party in the United States, the Labour Party in Britain, the Socialist and Social Democratic parties in France, Germany, and other Western European countries, as well as Sweden, of course, and Denmark and Norway, arranged for itself an electoral advantage that its rivals would find increasingly difficult to overcome in the polls. Political opportunism set aside the consideration that multiculturalism would give sanction to group identity and political demands on the basis of what serves the collective interest of an identifiable group based on ethnicity, religion, and later sexual orientation in a liberal democracy that presumably stands for protecting individual rights ahead of collective rights. So it's like a smokescreen. Multiculturalism thus was a policy born of bad faith that undermines liberal democracy by deliberately creating a wedge between new immigrants from third world countries, and first world countries too, and the settled population that no longer viewed itself in terms of a group identity as citizens or was actively discouraged to do so. And those who did were liable to be accused of promoting, quote, white supremacist or racist politics. The inherent bad faith aspect of multiculturalism in Canada was further underscored by the Citizenship Act of 1977, which reduced the residency requirements for citizenship from 5 to 3 years. It's been up under the Harper government. You have to live here for at least 3 years before you can even take the test. So some standards have been, the passing grade was raised from 60 to 75, which is kind of good. A little bit of higher standard is a little bit of a good thing. With citizenship, new immigrants acquired the right to vote after living in the country for less time than the normal life of an elected majority in Parliament. The provision, in fact, smacked of rank political opportunism to secure the immigrant vote for the Liberal Party. And that's the only reason multiculturalism was ever implemented. It was never implemented to celebrate the Ukrainians, which were numbered in the 5.5 million in the 70s.
Sean, I'm just going to say, yes, we all knew that the Liberal Party was making hay with all that, with a lot of the ethnic votes. Yeah. On the other hand, I do think that the multiculturalism policy was a response that Trudeau brought in to help deal with the English-French divide.
Well, it did, but it's also ethnically cleansing Montreal, because now I made a mistake in my last debate. I said 56.5% of people in Montreal spoke French as the first language. I went to StatsCan's database, because I got this information from the paper, the first statistic. Yeah. It said 53.8% of people in Montreal speak French as the first language. So it's even and 10 years ago it was 62.5. Yeah. So
wow, that's even a greater divide.
Montreal's going to be a non-French speaking city in less than a generation. And also there was statistics published by, for the people studying bilingualism in Canada outside Quebec.
Yeah.
It was 1.8 million in 2001. It was down to 1.4 million in 2011, or 400,000% plunge.
Wow.
So that's the writing on the wall. Remember you brought up the English thing with Britain? You mentioned, England a couple minutes ago, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
I did.
This book's called Surrender, Appeasing Islam and Sacrificing Freedom by Bruce Barber. He wrote While Europe Slept. Remember I used some of the quote from the Sweden debate?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. This is a small quote. This is from chapter 6, I'm Not Spartacus, by Bruce Barber. This book was released 2009. In February 2008, a British think tank, the Royal United Service Institute, issued a report prepared by a panel of politicians, diplomats, and military academic experts. This refreshingly non-dimmy document concluded that multiculturalism has done profound damage to Britain's sense of national identity and to their self-confidence as a people. Contrasting British difference with timidity in the face of Islamism with remember that guy who just got the soldier was just murdered by the jihadi thing?
A false flag operation. All the telltale signature marks.
With the implicit of the Islamist enemy, it warned that the inability of Britons to, quote, lay down the law with immigrant groups was endangering the country. The United Kingdom, it stated unequivocally, presents itself as a target, as a fragmenting post-Christian society increasingly divided about interpretations of its history, but its national aims, its values, and its political identity. We look like a soft touch. We are indeed a soft touch from within and without. There could hardly be a better summing up of the dilemma with which not only Britain but the entire Western world is confronted. So this isn't only native to England. Canada's dealing with similar problems. And do you guys ever read the Metro newspaper?
I try not to read anything.
Okay, I consider it the garbage paper, but I data mine it for research because it's free. It's really good information.
Well, why would you data mine if it's a garbage newspaper?
Because I'm writing a book about our lack of identity, and there's a lot of socially engineered articles, and I use sarcasm to fight these things. How ridiculous things are. Selling Illusions. Remember this book I told you guys before, The Cult to Multiculturalism?
Yeah.
This was republished in 2002. I'm going to read a little section, then I'm going to share this article because one contradicts the other.
Okay.
This chapter's chapter 9 endings, 2002. I do not know if the Miss Black Canada beauty pageant still exists, but it is my fervent hope that it does not. Beauty contests in themselves are offensive, and a racially segregated one is even more so. What would public reaction be, I wonder, if every year television offered a broadcast of a Miss White Canada beauty pageant? We celebrate community service awards only to blacks. Would we be comfortable with such awards only to whites? Probably not, right? Or people would feel uncomfortable. Why aren't there other people in the beauty contest? Why are they, So if we accept a racially inclusive conference for non-white writers, should we not accept one for white writers? Quebec offers the Association of Black Nurses, the Association of Black Artists, the Congress of Black Jurists. Replace black with white and watch the dancing visions of apartheid. It is inescapable that racism for one is racism for the other. And this article here, Figuring Out Fatherhood, was published March 4th, 2013 in the Metro paper in the news section on page 3. Brendan Hay founded a group called the Black Daddies Club, approved last summer for a $50,000 grant from the City of Toronto's Access, Equity and Human Rights Investment Program. The application met all the city's criteria for funding, says Denise Campbell, Director of Community Resources for the City of Toronto. There's a distinct, quote, knowledge gap about black fathers in the city, and this project would help fill that gap and create, quote, better services for black fathers and their families. Hay is 33. He felt there was a need to get data on black dads in Canada on the issues facing them. So that's and he got $50,000 slush fund from the city to promote this.
Now you see, that goes back to the reason he would get funding, and the reason he said he felt there needed to be more data for black is because, again, you're going back and looking at the history. Okay, and that's why I'm saying that's not useful. Okay, he's getting the funding to support what they did in the past.
Yeah, we don't live there anymore. Like, Sandra, that happened 100 years ago.
And that's why I'm saying it's not a good idea to look at our past. We just spent $50,000 to support somebody who's doing that.
I think we should, study the past and find out where there was racial segregation or gender discrimination.
But you don't live back there.
No, but it gives people cultural capital, so at least they know, when kids grow up, they know that Canada was different at one point.
So do you support that then? Do you support
giving that? 50,000?
Yes.
Probably not. I think it's a waste of money.
Okay, so do you support him if he said, well, look, I want to understand the black culture because I want to understand how come...
If he said single fathers instead of black or white or whatever, then it would be a better use of funding because that would be more open to anyone that wanted... It wouldn't put a color on an identity.
But see, he's not talking about that. He is talking about a culture, specifically a culture.
He's saying black, though, instead of Asian or white, or he's just excluded everyone else.
It's not really a black culture.
Well,
I mean... Are you sure about that?
All I'm saying is this, is that when you talk to the blacks in Toronto that come from Africa, and of course many nations in Africa,
right?
Every nation's got a different culture. And then you compare that to the black Canadians that come from Nova Scotia
you can
versus
say,
the black Canadians that come from the Caribbean.
You can say that every country has its own unique culture, and it's based on language, sports, parliamentary democracy or dictatorship, like whatever the system is in place will define the way people live their lives accordingly, like for better, for worse, right? Can I read a little bit from my book? Or?
Yes, of course you can.
Cool. All right. Raheel Raza is the author of Their Jihad, Not My Jihad, and is also a public speaker and a documentary filmmaker. She is a freelance journalist and founded Sacred Arts and Music Alliance. She was recently appointed to the Public Service Committee for Ontario College of Teachers. Raheel is an advocate for gender equality and an activist for women's rights. She's also the recipient of the City of Toronto's Constant Hamilton Award. On Thursday, June 20th, 2012, she was interviewed by the Generation Next newspaper about her thoughts on Canada's tricky multicultural policies. She pulled absolutely no punches with regards to Canada's failed multicultural experiment. Her views reflect what the majority of Canadians believe to be true in their hearts. Here's an excerpt from that interview. How do you view Canada's multiculturalism? What should be celebrated? In what areas is inclusion still lacking? And she said, multiculturalism is not something that can be legislated or forced from the top down. It can only be organic because you can't force people to like each other. As well, under the umbrella of multiculturalism, some communities continue to wallow in cultural practices that are problematic, and the rest of Canada says nothing because they say it's multiculturalism. Political correctness keeps ordinary Canadians from critiquing imported customs like honor killings, acts of Pervez and Shafia trial come to mind, and female genital mutilation. Canada can only be as inclusive as the people coming to Canada are willing to try. It's a personal effort and a two-way street. And then I said, this is exactly what is supposed to happen. New immigrants have to give a half-ass effort to integrate into the overall Canadian society. They need to learn English, realize that it's illegal to abuse and kill the women within their families. They should also know that men and women have equal status under Canadian law. They should show their faces in public places, unless it's Halloween. They should say please and thank you when addressing other citizens. It's about time Canada imposed some high standards on newcomers. Raheel Raza should be given the Order of Canada for being so patriotic. Her attitude needs to be strongly encouraged throughout the country. She is the prime example of excellence and sincerity that makes Canada the absolute best country in the world in which to live in. The States might be looked at as the best country too, but that's debatable. I'm a Canadian, so I have to be biased in my opinion. I was born in this country. This is all I know. But I love Canada and our ability to have these debates. Here's another thing. An article was published in the October 2012 edition of the Canadian Immigrant Magazine entitled Culture Shock. International students come for the education, but can find challenges adjusting socially amidst other cultures. Canada's failure to promote a pan-Canadian cultural narrative has left many new citizens wallowing in utter confusion. Here's a testimonial to that frustration. When I came here, it seemed like everything I knew about life had turned upside down. I would be invited to celebrate holidays I am not too passionate about, and in turn, there'd be nobody to share the days that were special to me, says Kristina Pikarenko, international student at Simon Fraser University. Kristina Pikarenko migrated from Komsomolsk, Amur in Russia to Vancouver around 2008. Canada gave her absolutely no cultural capital in order which to attempt to integrate into mainstream society. She confessed to having great difficulty in making Canadian friends. Was Christina bullied, or did she experience any discrimination? Here's what she had to say on those issues. No, of course not. There was no hate or no discrimination. Canadian society truly did feel like a welcoming mosaic where everyone has a place. However, the more I met different people, the more I started to doubt the true nature of multiculturalism as it is served to us by advertisers. In my experience, different cultures are not living together in the full sense of the word. Remember, Sandra, when you said you're supposed to have intercourse? And we joked about that in the...
Of course.
Instead, they are living side by side, acknowledge other existence, but then courteously ignore each other, says Kristina Picaro, international student from Simon Fraser University. So then I wrote, multiculturalism has allowed people to behave in ways that run completely counter to Canadian norms and values. People self-segregate into ghettos, and you've seen the ghettos all over the city, where people with signage in Mandarin or Arabic or German or Spanish, and you can't read the signs. And the country becomes divided along ethnic lines. Nobody feels Canadian because everyone is encouraged to celebrate the country where their parents came from instead of Canada, where they were born or became citizen in. You can't be an immigrant forever. You'll be a Canadian citizen at some point if you live here long enough. Pass the test.
Or your children sure will.
Yeah, absolutely. People that are born in Canada are Canadians. Do you ever read the, I don't know if they still publish it, the Jewish Tribune? Anybody?
I have read it.
Okay. An interesting article, well, I read it too. I read all the ethnic papers, because the ones that are written in English anyway. An interesting article was published on Thursday, October 18, 2012, in the Jewish Tribune entitled, Bring Multiculturalism into the 21st Century, MP says. There was a closed-door session between leaders from the League of Human Rights of B'nai B'rith, Canada, and the Parliamentary Secretary for Citizen Chung Sing Lung about how to bring multiculturalism into the 21st century. We're not changing multiculturalism, we're just trying to improve it, to make adjustments that will hopefully prevent problems looking forward. We need to modernize it, bring it into the 21st century. All I'm asking for is, are we on the right track? That's what Chung Sing Lung, MP for Willowdale and the Parliamentary Secretary for Citizenship, asked. So then I wrote, Canada is last in productivity, and new citizens have a much higher rates of unemployment, 12.8% compared to 5.6% for native-borns, or about 3 times as much.
Wow. Simply
because they aren't encouraged to adopt the Canadian narrative. Not only that, we don't value foreign credentials, so we've been hurting them for the last 20 years.
We're trying to fix that, right?
200, yeah, we are. 200 cab drivers were doctors in their former countries, so we've screwed over some pretty high.
Good news if you get sick in a cab, though.
Yeah, they joked about that. They joked about that, Hugh.
Good point. Did you hear that joke?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you get sick, make sure you're delivering a baby, make sure you take a cab. Canadians suffer economically, but also socially. If a new citizen has $1 billion idea, they are stuck because they can't speak English in order to start the process that could bring dreams into reality. Other people don't seem to agree and are resistant to common sense changes that can make Canada a better, more unified country. We have to recognize that multiculturalism as a policy has been very successful, one that has to be defended as such. At the same time, we have to recognize that even some things as successful as that has to grow with the times. Multiculturalism is a work in progress, says Marvin Kurtz, National Legal Counsel at B'nai B'rith, Canada.
See, you know, there's...
So then I wrote, Marvin Kurtz has failed to highlight the gender discrimination, the honor killings, and the Toronto 17 terrorists that had planned to storm Parliament Hill and behead the Honourable Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Marvin also failed to mention Canada's dead last in productivity in the world. Canada's multicultural policy encourages new citizens to live life in ways that not only run counter to Canadian values, but also threaten the economic and social cohesion of society, in some instances, the continuation of Canada's long democratic practices and traditions. Remember when they tried Sharia law in Ontario?
Okay, wait a second. Okay, are we really, really improving? Because have you guys heard about the Quebec soccer thing?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so they made it illegal. Okay, you could not have a turban. You could not wear a turban to play
Yeah.
soccer.
So
there was such a huge backlash, and they reversed the law.
Yeah,
yesterday.
I saw some videos of motorcycles, from Sikhs in BC. None of them had helmets on. They're driving their motorcycle. They're breaking the law, and they also want to work on construction sites. They want the law changed. So, and the people in construction sites are like, no, you have to wear a helmet. We're responsible for your safety.
You know what they should do? They should make turban-shaped helmets.
Yeah, you know what? They probably have to.
Okay, but okay. So what I heard was that the reason they actually reversed the decision was not because of the groups protesting. It was because of the soccer federation.
Yeah.
The soccer federation weighed in, and I guess they came down heavy on Quebec.
Right.
And they sided with.
Well,
being
they
able
had
to
a
wear-
big conference call about it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, but what should the soccer federation or whatever that group is called?
Well, it was the soccer. That was.
But that decision should not be in part. They should not be a part of the decision. That's
Sandra, because we don't promote our own
political.
cultural narrative and share it, everyone thinks they can just have special group rights, and everyone's asking for their own everything. So Canada is in danger of being a fractured country within 20, 30 years.
Well, we don't want that. Okay, listen, guys, we're just about out of time here. Sean, can you make your final
argument.
final points for people here today?
Okay. Well, since Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Holland declared the multicultural experiment a failure, I think Canada has no choice but to adopt a policy of interculturalism, duties, and responsibilities, which will define, contrary to what Sandra said about our history. I think history should be taught to the kids so that we understand where we went wrong in the past, so we can make improvements, so that at least people have an understanding of our cultural heritage and narrative, so that kids don't graduate ignorant of our 200-year history. We're not a new country. Canada has been around a long time, and we have no excuse for this wimpiness when it comes to our identity and our sense of disposition towards new citizens. They should know what kind of country we're going to, and we should tell them what kind of country they're moving to, so they don't end up doing things that hurt themselves or their families.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good.
Well, and
Sean.
one observation. It'll be very interesting to see in the UK, now that 50%, more than 50% are foreigners, what will happen to the royal family, and whether or not that will fall by the wayside.
Maybe there'll be a new royal family, and they'll be from
Sheiks or
Sikhs or
Be
Hindus
careful, though. Look what happened when Princess Di was hanging out with Dodi Fayed.
Well, there you go. Maybe maybe there's a connection, a bigger connection than we know.
Stay away from those tunnels.
It was all done for cheap labor. Like this is all being done for to depress labor markets.
Okay, guys, got to wrap it up. Sean, where
Thank
can
you,
people
Sean.
get in touch with you if they want to follow up?
Well, they
What's
can.
The work that you do?
The other debate I did before this one was Canada's broken mosaic, the literary critics of multiculturalism. That was the part one.
Yeah.
So this is part two.
Yeah.
I've done other debates like the sellout of corporate Canada.
They're all listed on your website, right?
Yeah.
Which is?
The Canadian Dream, which is about our version of the American Dream. It's all on YouTube. So Sean Dalton on YouTube, and you can see all the debates that we've done on these controversial topics. But I appreciate you guys forwarding the debate and the conversation on these things, because I look forward to a more socially cohesive, unified Canada in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a big struggle for us to get there.
Because we have to fight the New World Order that just wants to impose a global government on fractured cultures around the world.
We also have to fight amongst ourselves. And one of the founders of the U.S. Constitution said the thing we shouldn't become is a squabbling tangle of nationalities, squabbling. He said in 1914, he said that was the most dangerous things that could happen to the United States. Or maybe it was 1800 or something, but he's on record saying that. So Canada is becoming that narrative. We're going to become a squabbling, we want this, groups are going to ask for this, groups are going to ask for that, and no one's going to ask for a Canadian history or cultural narrative, because everyone's too busy having their cultural centers funded by slush funds from the government and encouraging not to be Canadian.
What if we apply for a grant what is Canadian?
What if we end the show now, Sandra? Thanks, everybody. That's been it for Liquid Lunch. We'll see you next week here. See ya. Bye.
Children under 5 years old have a migrant background. In the early 1960s, we brought the guest workers to Germany. Now they're living with us. We lied to ourselves for a while. We said they won't stay long. One day they'll be gone. But this is not the case. Of course, the multicultural approach, living side by side and being happy with each other, this approach has failed utterly.
oui, c'est un échec.
My response is clearly yes, it's a failure. The truth is that in all our democracies we've been too preoccupied with the identity of those arriving and not enough with that of the countries which welcome.
Of state multiculturalism, we've encouraged different cultures to live separate lives apart from each other and apart from the mainstream. We failed to provide a vision of society to which they feel they want to belong. We've even tolerated these segregated communities behaving in ways that run completely counter to our values.
Mevrouw Merkel zegt dat de multiculturele samenleving volkomen is mislukt. Niet een beetje is mislukt, nee, volkomen is mislukt. En als zij dat zegt, dan wil dat nogal wat zeggen. De belangrijkste politica, christendemocraat, van het belangrijkste land van Europa, Duitsland, doorbreekt een taboe en zegt waar het op staat. Zegt wat miljoenen mensen vinden. Teksten, voorzitter, waar je in Nederland mee voor de rechter zou komen, kunnen in Duitsland wel, uitgesproken door leidende christendemocraten die daar in dat land de leiding nemen op dit moment op het gebied van islamkritiek. Tegen bondskanselier Merkel, voorzitter, ik vervolg mijn betoog, zou ik deze keer dan ook willen zeggen, mevrouw Merkel, Sie haben recht. En dat ging over de multiculturele samenleving. Voorzitter, er is dus hoop. Overal in Europa scheurt het politieke landschap open. En niets kan dat ook tegenhouden.